My parents did not come to my graduation, not because there was an accident, not because someone was sick. They did not come because my younger brother Marcus was closing a real estate deal in Scottsdale that weekend, and they decided to fly out and watch him do it. They sent me a text at 6 in the morning. I read it in my cap and gown in the parking lot of the auditorium. It said, "We are so proud of you. We know you understand." What they did not know, what no one in my family knew except my grandmother Ruth, was that my grandfather had been watching them for 11 years. He had been watching and he had been preparing, and the document he left behind was triggered by the exact moment they chose not to come. By the time I walked across that stage alone, the trap had already closed. They just did not hear it yet. My name is Claire Harmon. I am 29 years old. I grew up in a 4-bedroom house in Raleigh, North Carolina. Kind of house that looked like a family from the outside. Clean driveway, good neighborhood, Christmas lights every December, and with something more complicated on the inside. My father's name is Richard. He spent 30 years in commercial real estate development. Not building things, selling things. Deals, relationships, handshakes at dinners where the wine cost more than my college textbooks. He was good at it. He was excellent at it, in the way that certain people are excellent at the thing that also costs them everything they do not notice losing. My mother's name is Diane. She ran the household and Richard's professional schedule and the family calendar with the efficiency of someone who had decided that efficiency was the same as love. She kept everything moving. She just didn't always notice what she was moving it away from. My brother Marcus is 4 years younger than me. I want to be careful about how I describe Marcus because I do not think he was a bad person. I think he was a person who was handed everything so consistently and so early that he simply never developed the understanding that things could be otherwise. When you grow up expecting doors to open, you do not notice the people holding them. Marcus was charming the way my father was charming. He wanted to go into real estate. My father loved this. He loved it the way you love a mirror that shows you exactly what you want it to see. I was not the mirror. I was pre-law. Then I switched to accounting after my second year because I was better at it and because I found something satisfying about the precision of numbers, the way they told the truth, whether anyone wanted them to or not. My father found accounting dull. He did not say this exactly. He said it with the specific inattentiveness of a man who stops asking follow-up questions about the thing he considers less interesting. My grandfather's name was Walter Harmon. He was my father's father. He had built a regional insurance company from nothing over 40 years, sold it in 2008, and spent the decade after that playing chess, reading history, and watching his grandchildren with the particular attention of someone who has learned that watching carefully is more useful than speaking prematurely. Walter died in 2019. I was 23. He had been sick for 8 months, and we had all known it was coming, and it still arrived the way these things do, suddenly, finally, with a weight that has no rehearsal. What I did not know when he died was what he had done, what he had been building, quietly, for 11 years, in the space between what our family said it was and what it actually was. I did not know any of that until the morning my parents sent me a text and got on a plane to Scottsdale. I want to tell you about the specific texture of growing up the way I grew up, because I think it matters for what comes later. It was not dramatic. That is the thing I need you to understand. There was no shouting. There was no cruelty in the obvious sense. My parents loved us. I believe that without reservation. What they did not do was see us equally, and the particular pain of that kind of childhood is that it is invisible. There is nothing to point to. There is only the accumulation of small moments that leave a specific shape over time. Marcus's first startup. He was 20, still in school. My father flew to meet with the investors. He took 2 days off work. He wore his best suit. He sat in that room and nodded and said his son had extraordinary instincts, and the investors believed him because Richard Harmon in a room was the kind of presence that made people believe things. The startup failed in 18 months. My father absorbed this without visible distress. Marcus had learned something. Growth was not linear. My father had several expressions for the failure of the people he loved that reframed the failure as something else. He had none of these expressions for the things that actually succeeded. Success did not need reframing. Success was simply what was expected. My CPA exam, I passed it on the first attempt. This is not common. The pass rate nationally is below 50% on the first try. I called my parents that evening. My mother said, "That is wonderful, Claire." My father said, "Good for you." Marcus said nothing, because Marcus did not know I had taken it, because no one had told him, because it had not come up in conversation. I am not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I am telling you this so that you understand the ecosystem in which my grandfather made his decisions. Walter saw all of it. He came to Thanksgiving every year until his health made travel difficult. He sat at the table and he listened, and he played chess with me on Saturday mornings, because I was the one who asked to learn, and Marcus was not interested, and Walter believed that attention was the most honest form of love. He never said anything critical about my father in my presence, not once. He had the discipline of someone who understood that saying the thing out loud before the time was right served no one. He just kept watching, and in 2013, the year I started college, he went to see his estate attorney for the first time about something he had been thinking about for a while. I graduated with my MBA on a Saturday in May. The program was at Duke. It had taken me 3 years part-time while I was working full-time at an accounting firm in Durham. I had been working toward it while simultaneously building a client base, logging 60-hour weeks, and contributing to the mortgage on a small house I had bought at 26 because I wanted something that was mine. I had saved 4 seats: my parents, Marcus, and my grandmother Ruth, who was my mother's mother, and who had been asking about the graduation for 6 months, the way grandmothers ask about things. Interest, with plans, with the assumption that of course she would be there. The text came at 6:17 in the morning. "Claire, we are so sorry, honey. Marcus has his first solo close happening Saturday afternoon in Scottsdale. Buyers flew in from overseas, and the timing shifted at the last minute. Your father felt he needed to be there for support. I am coming with him. We are so proud of everything you have accomplished. We know you understand. We will celebrate properly when we are back next week. Love, Mom." I sat in my car in the parking lot of the auditorium, and I read it 3 times. I want to describe what I felt accurately, because the accurate description is not what people expect. I did not cry. I was not even surprised in the way that surprise requires the thing to be unexpected. What I felt was something closer to recognition, the particular feeling of something you have known for a long time finally being said out loud. I thought about my father in a room in Scottsdale in his best suit, nodding, saying his son had extraordinary instincts. I put the phone in my bag. I walked into the auditorium. My grandmother Ruth was already there. She was in the 4th row on the aisle, with a handmade sign that said, "Claire Harmon, MBA," and a balloon that was already tilting sideways from the air conditioning. She had driven 2 hours by herself at 5 in the morning. She was 73 years old. She looked at me when I walked in, and she did not ask where my parents were. She just opened her arms. I sat next to her for a few minutes before I had to go to the staging area. She held my hand. She did not say anything for a while. Then she said, "Your grandfather called this." I looked at her. She said, "Not today. I mean everything. He called all of it a long time ago. And when you are ready to hear about it, I have something to show you." I did not know what she meant. I walked across that stage, alone. There were 2,000 people in that room, and I found Ruth in the 4th row the moment my name was called, and she was standing and clapping with both hands above her head, and the balloon was fully sideways now, and I laughed, actually laughed on the stage, and the dean looked at me and smiled. That is the moment I want to remember, not the text, not the empty seats. Ruth with her sideways balloon. The rest of this story is about what she showed me after. We went to lunch after the ceremony, a small Italian place near campus that Ruth had looked up the week before because she had been planning this day for months. She had made a reservation. She had ordered a cake in advance. It said, "Congratulations, MBA," in blue frosting. And the restaurant sang to me, and I was 29 years old, and I cried for the first time that day, not from sadness, from the specific emotion that has no clean name, the one that is gratitude and grief at the same time. After lunch, Ruth reached into her large patchwork bag, the one she carried everywhere that held everything, medication, hard candy, photographs, whatever she was currently reading, and she set a sealed envelope on the table. It had my name on it in my grandfather's handwriting. Walter died 4 years ago, but I knew his handwriting the way you know the handwriting of people who wrote you letters when letters were still how people communicated. He had written me a letter every year for Christmas until I was in college. Then he switched to cards, but the handwriting was the same. The envelope was sealed with a sticker that said, "Do not open," until Claire's graduation from her highest degree. Ruth watched me look at it. "He gave it to me in 2018, she said, the year before he died. He said it needed to wait for the right moment. He said I would know the moment." I said, "What if I am not there when she graduates?" He said, "Ruth, you will be there. He knew you. He always knew." I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, and behind it 3 pages of legal documents with the seal of a law firm in Raleigh at the top. The letter first. I am going to tell you what it said in my own words, because some of it is private and belongs to me alone. But the part that matters, the part that changed everything, I want you to understand precisely. Walter wrote that he had watched our family for a long time. He wrote that he loved my father, and he was proud of what Richard had built, but that he had watched Richard make a consistent choice over many years, the choice to see Marcus and not to see me, and that this choice had a cost that Richard did not understand because Richard had never had to pay for it. He wrote that he did not blame Marcus. He wrote that the child who is handed everything is not more loved, he is more burdened, and that he worried for Marcus in a way he did not say out loud, because saying it would not help. He wrote that he had arranged his estate carefully, and he had arranged it to reflect what he actually saw, rather than what the family assumed. Then I read the legal documents. Walter's estate, outside of what had already gone to my grandmother, was divided as follows. Marcus received a cash inheritance, a fair amount, not nothing, but a specific amount that represented Walter's acknowledgement of Marcus as his grandchild and nothing more. The remainder, the majority of the estate, which included a commercial property in Raleigh that Walter had owned since 1991 and had never sold because he believed in holding real assets, and which by 2019 had a current market value that made me go still when I read the number, went to me. Not split, not partially, to me. The condition was this: the inheritance would transfer on the date of my graduation from my highest academic degree. It could not be accessed before that date. It could not be transferred, contested, or amended. Walter had structured it with the help of an attorney who specialized in irrevocable trusts, and he had done it carefully, methodically, the way he did everything. He had been watching for 11 years, and the morning my parents got on a plane to Scottsdale, the trust had triggered. I sat at that table in the Italian restaurant with a piece of cake half eaten in front of me, and I read the documents 3 times. Ruth sat across from me with her hands folded on the table. "Did you know?" I asked her. "I knew he planned something," she said. "I did not know the details. He was always very private about money." She paused. "He said one thing to me when he gave me the envelope. He said, 'Whoever is not there on that day has already told you everything you need to know about them.'" I put the documents down on the table. I thought about the text. "We know you understand." I picked up my phone. I called the law firm number at the top of the letterhead. But the number connected to an attorney named James Caldwell, who had been handling this specific matter for 4 years, and who said, "Hello, Ms. Harmon. I have been expecting your call." James Caldwell had been my grandfather's attorney for 15 years. He was the kind of man who spoke at a measured pace and chose words the way someone chooses them when they understand words have consequences. He had known this moment was coming since 2013. He explained the structure of the trust to me over the phone while Ruth listened and the restaurant cleared the lunch service around us. He explained that Walter had made one fundamental decision in how he structured the estate. He did not want there to be any ambiguity. He had watched estates contested and families destroyed by ambiguity, and he had decided that the kindest thing he could do, for everyone, including Richard, was to be completely clear. The property, James said, is a commercial building in the Glenwood district. It is currently tenanted. It generates monthly rental income. The current appraised value is significant. He gave me the number. I wrote it on a napkin because I did not trust myself to hold it in my head. He continued. Walter specifically requested that I send formal notification to all parties who would have expected to benefit from his estate, meaning your father, on the date the trust triggered. That notification went out this morning. This morning, I said. Correct? At 9 a.m. He wanted everyone to learn simultaneously. He felt it was more honest that way. I looked at the napkin with the number on it. My father was in Scottsdale. He had been in Scottsdale since, I checked the text, they had booked flights days ago. The timing had not shifted at the last minute the way the text said. The Scottsdale trip had been planned. The buyers from overseas had been scheduled. Marcus's first solo close had been on the calendar. And my father had chosen it over my graduation, deliberately, with enough lead time to book flights, and had told me it was last minute because last minute was easier than the truth. James said, "Are you all right, Miss Harmon?" I said yes. He said, "Your grandfather wanted me to tell you something on his behalf if you called on this date." He prepared a statement. May I read it? I said yes. James read, Claire has worked for everything she has. She has never asked anyone to hold the door for her. What I am giving her is not charity. It is recognition. There is a difference. I hope she knows the difference. I hope she spends it well. I hope she understands that I saw her. I saw her the whole time. I held the phone against my ear and did not say anything for a long moment. Ruth was watching me from across the table. She knew. She had always known. Not the amount, not the property, not the documents, but the truth underneath all of it. That Walter had been paying attention when no one else was. I told him I would call on Monday to discuss next steps. He said he looked forward to it. I put the phone down and looked at Ruth. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She said, "He would have liked that you laughed on stage." And I started crying again. The second time that day. Still the good kind. My father called at 4:17 that afternoon. I was back at my house by then. I had taken Ruth to see the campus. She had asked to see the building where I had taken most of my classes, so we walked through it slowly, while she looked at everything with the focused interest of someone who understands that being present is the point. And then I drove her to her hotel, and then I drove home. I knew what the call was about. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again 11 minutes later, and then my mother, and then my father again. I put the phone face down on the kitchen counter and made myself a cup of coffee and sat with it for a while. I want to be honest about what I was feeling, because I think the honest description is more useful than a simple one. I was not angry. That surprised me. I had expected anger, and instead there was something quieter and more settled, like a room after the windows have been opened. Something that had been stale for a long time was moving now. I thought about my grandfather sitting with his attorney in 2013, the year I started college. I thought about him watching Richard and Marcus at Thanksgiving, nodding, saying nothing, playing chess with me on Saturday mornings, paying attention in a specific way that Walter paid attention to everything. He had known. He had seen the whole arc of it before any of us understood we were living inside one. I picked up the phone. I called my father back. He answered on the first ring. Claire. His voice had the particular tightness of a person who has just received unexpected information and is attempting to manage their response before they fully understand what they are responding to. Hi, Dad. We got a letter from a law firm today about your grandfather's estate. I know. A silence. You knew about this. His voice shifted slightly, not angry, confused, which was rarer. I found out today. He left me a letter. Another silence. Longer. I want to explain something about my father. He was not a greedy man in the simple sense. He did not sit around calculating what he would inherit. What he was, and what this situation revealed, was a man who had made assumptions so automatic that he had never examined them. He assumed that my grandfather's estate would be divided equally between his 2 grandchildren, because that was how things worked, because that was the natural order of things, and he had simply never questioned it. The letter from James Caldwell had questioned it on Walter's behalf. Permanently. Claire, he said finally, I need to understand what your grandfather was thinking. I think, I said, that he was thinking very clearly. What does that mean? It means he watched us for a long time. He watched the choices that got made. And he decided to reflect those choices back in the way he structured his estate. My father was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I had not expected. He asked, Did you know he was doing this when he was alive? No. I knew nothing until today. Another silence. But it does not surprise you, he said. It was not quite a question. No, I said, it does not surprise me. I heard him exhale slowly, not dramatically, just a man letting out a breath that had somewhere to go. We did not do right by you today, he said. I let that sit for a moment. Today, I said carefully, is part of a longer pattern. I think you know that. He did not argue. That surprised me too. He said, I would like to come and see you when we get back. Not to talk about the estate, just to see you. I thought about it honestly. I said, okay. I hung up. I sat for a while with the cold coffee and the quiet house, and I thought about my grandfather playing chess with me on Saturday mornings when I was 11 years old. I thought about how he had always let the first game go a little longer than it needed to before he won. He said it was because you learned more from a loss that was close than from one that was quick. I understood now that he had been teaching me something much bigger than chess. Marcus called on Sunday. I had expected this. I had also expected it to be harder than it was. Marcus and I did not have a bad relationship. We had a distant one, which is its own kind of loss, but not the same as hostility. He called in the evening. His voice was careful in a way Marcus's voice was not usually careful. Marcus was generally easy, assured, comfortable in the space he occupied. He was careful now. He said, I heard about Granddad's estate. I said yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I want to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. I said, okay. He said, I think I owe you an apology. Not about the inheritance. That was Granddad's decision, and I think I understand why he made it. But about a lot of other things, about not paying attention, about benefiting from the way things were set up, without ever stopping to look at what that meant for you. He stopped. I let the silence be what it was. He said, I am not sure I would have said any of this before Saturday. I think it took something this concrete for me to actually look at it. I said, I know. He said, Are you angry at me? I thought about it honestly. No, I said. I think you lived in the world as it was presented to you. That's what most people do. He said, I want to be different than that. I said, I know. We talked for an hour. It was the longest conversation Marcus and I had had in years, maybe the longest we had ever had as adults. I do not want to overstate what it was. It was a beginning of something, not a resolution, but it was real in a way that had not been available to us before, because we had both needed something to make the invisible visible before we could talk about it honestly. My parents came to see me the following Thursday. They drove up from Raleigh. My father brought flowers, which was not something he typically did, and my mother brought food, which was something she always did when she did not know what else to bring. We sat at my kitchen table. My father was quiet for the first few minutes, in the way that people are quiet when they have been assembling something to say and are still not sure the assembly is right. He said, "I have been thinking about what you said on the phone, about the pattern." I said, "I know you have." He said, "I do not have a defense for it. I thought I was fair. I told myself the story that I was fair, and I let myself believe it because it was easier than looking at what I was actually doing." I let him say it. I did not fill the space. He said, "Your grandfather was a better man than me in this way. He saw things as they were. I saw things as I needed them to be." My mother reached across the table and put her hand on my arm. She did not say anything. She just held on. I looked at my father. I said, "I am not interested in punishing you. That is not what this is. What I need is for you to actually see me going forward. Not the version of me that is convenient for the story you are telling about the family. Me. The way grandfather saw me. That is what I need." He looked at me for a long time. He said, "I can try." I said, "I know." It was not a reconciliation. It was a beginning. The same kind of beginning Marcus and I had started. Uncertain, imperfect, real. My grandfather had not designed his estate to punish my father. I understood that fully by this point. He had designed it to do what he had always done, to reflect the truth, to take what was invisible and make it impossible to ignore. He knew that money was the language my father spoke most fluently. He knew that a letter would be easier to dismiss than a legal document. He knew that timing mattered, that the truth needed to arrive on the same day as the consequence of ignoring it, so that the two could not be separated. He had been a good businessman. He had also been a better grandfather than any of us had understood while he was alive. The commercial property is a 4-story building in the Glenwood district of Raleigh. Walter bought it in 1991 when the neighborhood was industrial and uncertain, and most people did not see what it might become. He saw it. He held it for 28 years while the neighborhood changed around it, and the value grew quietly the way things grow when no one is forcing them. By the time the trust transferred to me, the building was fully tenanted by 3 businesses on long-term leases. The income it generated monthly was consistent and documented and structured in the way that Walter structured everything, carefully, with attention to detail, with the understanding that good systems run themselves if you build them right. I called James Caldwell on Monday morning, as I had promised. We met Tuesday. He walked me through the full picture. I sat in his conference room with a legal pad and a pen, and I took notes the way I always take notes. Organized, thorough, with follow-up questions marked in the margin. And James watched me do this with an expression that I eventually understood was recognition. He said, "Your grandfather described you as the one who takes notes." I said, "Was that a compliment?" He said, "From Walter Harmon, describing someone as the one who takes notes was the highest compliment he gave." I managed the transition over the following months with the help of James and a property manager Walter had already arranged. The tenants were informed of the ownership change. The leases were reviewed and confirmed. The accounts were transferred. I did not quit my job. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. The inheritance changed my financial position significantly. It did not change who I was or what I had built on my own. I kept my clients. I kept my practice. I kept the house I had bought at 26 because I wanted something that was mine. What I did do was begin to plan. I had been doing the accounting for other people's businesses for 5 years. I understood how money moved, where it went wrong, what a well-run operation looked like from the inside versus what it looked like from the outside. I had ideas that I had been filing away for later because later required capital, and capital was the thing I had been building slowly. Later arrived faster than I had expected. I am not going to walk you through every decision I made in the 18 months after my graduation, because this story is not primarily about the money. The money is what made the larger pattern visible. The larger pattern is what this story is actually about. I want to tell you about my grandmother Ruth. She is 75 now. She drives herself everywhere and has opinions about everything, and makes a peach cobbler that I have tried to replicate 7 times with consistent failure. She lives 40 minutes south of Raleigh, in the house where my mother grew up, which has a garden that Ruth tends with the same focused attention she brings to everything. After my graduation, I started going to see her more deliberately, not just on holidays, and not just because of obligation, because I wanted to, because she was one of the people who had seen me clearly and shown up for me completely, and those people deserve more of your time than you usually give them. We talk on the phone every Sunday. We have been doing this for 2 years now. She asks about my week, and I ask about hers, and sometimes we talk about nothing, and sometimes we talk about things that matter. And the line between those 2 categories is thinner than most people realize. She told me something about Walter once, something he had said to her when he was first setting up the trust. She said he told her that the thing he was most afraid of was leaving me with nothing while I was still pretending everything was fine. He was afraid, she said, that you would keep being gracious about it, and that being gracious would cost you things you should not have to spend. I thought about that for a long time. I thought about the years of family dinners where I had been gracious, the years of watching Marcus receive things and saying nothing because saying something served no purpose. The energy I had spent managing my own disappointment so that no one else had to feel uncomfortable. Walter had seen that too. He had seen the cost of it. And his answer was not to confront my father. His answer was to make sure that the cost I had paid was acknowledged, materially and permanently, in a way that no one could argue with. That is the thing about my grandfather that I keep coming back to. He was not reactive. He did not act from anger or from the desire to punish. He acted from clarity, from a long, patient, unsentimental understanding of what was true and what it required. I try to be more like that. I do not always succeed, but I try. 2 years have passed since the graduation. My parents and I have a relationship that is different than what it was. Not fixed. I want to be honest about that. Not the relationship I might have had if the pattern had been different. But different than before, which is something. My father calls more than he used to. He asks questions and waits for the answers rather than filling the space with his own narrative. Last month he called just to tell me about a book he was reading that he thought I would like. It was a history of commercial real estate in American cities, and he was right. I liked it. We talked for 40 minutes. These things matter. They are not nothing. My mother came to visit in March. She stayed for 3 days. We cooked together and walked in the morning, and one evening she sat at my kitchen table and said, I did not see what I was doing. I thought I was just being a good wife and a good mother, and I did not understand that those 2 things had been set up in opposition to each other in ways I should have questioned. I said, I know. She said, I am sorry, Claire. I said, I know that too. Marcus is living in Phoenix now. He is still in real estate, and he is good at it, genuinely good at it, it turns out, when he is working without the scaffolding of our father's connections and reputation. He has closed deals on his own merits, and he understands the difference, finally, between earning something and receiving it. We talk every couple of weeks. He told me recently that he had started mentoring a young agent in his office, someone who reminded him of himself when he started, but without the advantages Marcus had. He said he was trying to be deliberate about making sure the person had what they needed. I thought that was good. I thought Walter would have thought so too. As for me, I still take notes in the margins. I still work 60-hour weeks sometimes, not because I have to, but because I find the work genuinely interesting, which I understand is a kind of luck. The property in Glenwood is doing well. The businesses I have been building, slowly and carefully, are doing well. Ruth's cobbler is still better than mine. I have accepted this. I think about my grandfather often. I think about him most in the quiet moments, early morning with coffee, the chessboard I keep on my desk that I never got rid of, the Saturday mornings when I was 11 and he let the game go longer than it needed to. He saw me. He saw me the whole time, the way the letter said. He prepared something in the quiet years that would arrive at exactly the right moment, triggered by the choice that made the pattern undeniable. The morning my parents did not come was the morning the trust activated. That was not an accident. Walter had written the condition himself. Whoever is not there on that day, Ruth said he told her, has already told you everything you need to know. But here is the thing I carry now, that I did not fully understand when I read the documents at that Italian restaurant 2 years ago. The inheritance was not the point. The inheritance was the mechanism. The point was the letter. The point was what he wrote, that he saw me, that my work was real, that what I had built on my own had value independent of what anyone else decided to recognize. The money made it impossible to ignore. But the thing that mattered was simpler than money. It was a grandfather, sitting at a kitchen table on a Saturday morning in 1995, teaching his 11-year-old granddaughter that the close game is the one you learn from. It was someone paying attention. It was someone showing up. If you have had someone in your life who saw you when others did not, who paid attention when attention cost something, I want you to tell them. Not tomorrow, now, if you can. Do not wait for the Italian restaurant and the napkin, with the number on it and the Ruth across the table with her sideways balloon. Go tell them now. And if you have been the one who did not show up, if you are reading this and recognizing something, I want you to know that the beginning of something different is available. It is not easy. It requires you to see the pattern and say so out loud without defense. My father did that. It was hard for him. It changed something. The story is not finished. Stories like this do not finish. They adjust and continue, and what you do next is the part that matters. My grandfather knew that. He built 11 years of patience into a document and gave it to Ruth with instructions and trusted the timing to take care of itself. He was almost always right about timing. If this story stayed with you, if you have watched something invisible become visible in your own family, tell me in the comments. I read every one, and if you are not subscribed yet, I would be glad to have you here for the next one.